morning. We are back. So I am joined by Senator Claire McCaskill, the senior senator of Missouri. Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure. Great.
So earlier today, I spent some time up here with Beau Willimon, the creator of House of Cards, talking about women and gender and the roles of politics. Wanted to get your read. I know you've watched this last season. What do you think? Does he portray women lawmakers accurately, or is it more fiction?
There is really very little that's portrayed accurately in that show. They lost me when there was a sexual encounter with the vice president and his wife and the Secret Service man.
It's over.
I'm done. I mean, it was one thing for him to be murdering people, but, you know, I hope that wasn't a spoiler for any of you who haven't seen it yet, but you didn't miss much in terms of that issue. So I don't think the show is very realistic. It's fun, frothy fun.
A little fluff.
A little fluff. And I think people in the Beltway are probably more fixated on it than most of the people I work for.
That's probably true. Well, one issue that did come up in that you've spent a lot of time is military sexual assault. You know, it's certainly, he portrayed more of the Senator Gillibrand approach, but a lot of focus on the chain of command. I know you obviously got a lot of things passed this last year. What was your kind of reaction to the depiction that how he portrayed it?
Well, I mean, how they portrayed it, you know, I didn't really spend a lot of time on that. I think that the thing that I would like to say, particularly to this audience, knowing the subject that we're talking about today, is that we had 36 major reforms that were on the table. And Kirsten Gillibrand and I worked very, very hard, and she will be on right after me. And I want to say that she is my friend. We work well together. We had 35 of them that we agreed on. There was one policy that we disagreed on, an honest policy difference as to which way would better protect victims and which way would result in more prosecutions. She has compelling arguments, and I believe if someone takes the time to get through them all and understand how I came to that conclusion, my arguments are compelling also. And the interesting thing was the media got totally fixated on the two women disagreeing on policy. That became the bright and shiny object, and this massive amount of historic reform didn't get 1 inch of the coverage that it deserved because everyone was all about the one difference.
When there's tension, that's what we usually like to focus on.
Yeah, the tension is, the disagreement is what the media focuses on. So it was, in a way, I am proud because we've had two women disagree on policy and handle it, I think, with dignity and class and being kind to one another. And at the end of the day, it is about the policy, not about the politics. So I think that we've shown that now we've kind of crossed that Rubicon, that women can disagree on substantive policy and that lightning doesn't strike the building. So I think it's fine.
Talk to me a little bit about, and this isn't all we're going to talk about, but I wanted to, there's been a lot of things in the news in terms of two really high-profile cases and decisions, and this has been used as, for people that wanted the chain of command provision to say that it should go forward. How do you view that? There was basically two cases. There was one football player that didn't get maybe the strongest, he was dismissed and resigned from the Naval Academy in another case.
Well, in both cases, it's interesting because in both cases, the military prosecutor didn't want the case to go forward. So in the alternative policy that did not pass, those cases would have been over. The prosecutor in the General Sinclair case said this case should not go to trial. And in fact, it was the victim's counsel that Kirsten and I worked so hard on. It was that victim advocate in the Sinclair case that wrote to the command and said, don't let the prosecutor do this. This needs to go to trial. And because of that advocacy on behalf of the victim, the commander agreed and disagreed with the prosecutor, as they have almost 100 times over the last 2 years, where the prosecutor said no and the commander said it should go to trial. I know it's counterintuitive, but those are the facts.
So it's almost you were saying this is a defense of your argument.
If the prosecutor has unfettered discretion to make the sole decision, the Sinclair case would have never gone to trial. She would have never had an opportunity to testify in open court. He never would have had to testify in open court. He never would have pled guilty to anything that even acknowledged mistreatment of the victim. Now, am I happy with the outcome as a prosecutor who put hundreds of perpetrators in prison personally? No, I'm not happy with the outcome because I believe the victim was telling the truth. But there were challenges evidentiary with that case. The Naval Academy case is the same thing. Once again, if the prosecutors had been in charge, that case never would have gone forward. So the data and the facts show that the problem is not when the prosecutor says go, that the commander says no. That's not the problem. The problem is that we have not given an adequate support and information and nourishment and respect and power to the victim in the UCMJ. And that's what those 35 reforms are about giving them that power. As somebody who spent a lot of time around prosecutors, giving them the unfettered discretion, we too often have prosecutors that are more focused on their one-loss record and not focused on whether or not, as a commander should be, this case deserves an airing in open court because of the severity of the circumstances and the message we're trying to send the rest of the unit.
Where do you see this issue going forward? I mean, President Obama has pledged that if massive changes aren't seen here, he's going to take action. Senator Gillibrand has said that she's going to bring up her proposal again in May. Are you expecting the same kind of fight that happened in this coming year forward? Well,
we know when our allies did this, there was no increase in reporting. So what I'm looking for is an increase in reporting, and we've seen a spike in reporting this year. Now, we also need to keep track of apples-to-apples comparisons on the anonymous survey in terms of, I don't like the fact that the survey just talks about unwanted sexual contact, because there's unwanted sexual contact, it's not criminal. I wish that survey was designed at its inception with someone who was paying more attention to making sure we've got a good baseline performance measure of the incident of actual criminal behavior. Having said that, we obviously will track that, but most importantly, we're going to track the reporting. And because we know how underreported this is, and I'm now moving on because I know there's another place where this crime is massively underreported. I'm not moving on because I'm going to continue to monitor this, as will Kirsten, together on the Armed Services Committee. We will be paying very close attention. I've already scheduled a trip to West Point to look and make sure that these reforms are being implemented on that campus and the other Service Academy campuses. But the other place that I've now begun work, which I think is really important, is college campuses.
What are you, I saw some of the news clips on this recently. What exactly are you looking at trying to do there?
Well, right now my staff is doing preparing for a demand under Title IX for reporting information from college campuses. We are going to do a random survey in terms of services that are available. And we're not going to find that out by going through the administration. We're going to do it in a more surreptitious way to find out what services are available. I do think that young women on campuses, first of all, this will always be an underreported crime. I can tell you from crying with hundreds of victims that it is very difficult to come out into the light and share the most painfully private, personal moment of your life, knowing you're going to be challenged. Knowing that you're going to be challenged. And so, but a college campus, those young women and young men are in a closed environment where they are very worried about the ramifications to them personally, and too often young women think, well, I was drinking, so maybe I screwed up, or maybe I shouldn't have been at that party, or maybe I didn't know the guy well enough. And they second guess whether they're at fault even though someone has committed a brutal crime against them. And that's where we've got to make sure those services are available so those young women feel more empowered to call out the criminal behavior that they've been subjected to.
So let's shift a little bit in this discussion because we don't have a lot of time left. And I wanted to talk a lot about this, is about women running for office. How important do you think it is? is that part of your big campaign? I know you're going to be doing a speech called Taking Risks is Ladylike.
Right. I'm doing a political a political symposium in Iowa on Friday, and what I try to talk, and by the way, Kirsten and Sheryl Sandberg and all of us that are working on this whole concept of leaning in and getting off the sidelines, and this is all about women taking risks. And what I try to do is make sure everyone understands that ambition and taking risks should be part of our feminine personality. It should be very feminine to, whether it's being bossy, or as Sheryl is working on, or whether it is playing in the game rather than just cheering from the sidelines. This is really the message for this generation. And I look at the progress. I hate to admit how old I am. I am older than dirt. I started knocking on doors when I was in my 20s, running for state representative. When I was single, I rented, I didn't own. I didn't even have a dog for the photograph. And I will tell you that my journey over the last 30 years has been full of amazing, unbelievably outrageous experiences as it relates to my gender. On the other hand, I have had a front row seat to real progress. And I think it's really important that now that women have role models, that they see themselves in these jobs and that they realize that the schedule is more flexible than you might imagine. It is an incredibly challenging and intellectually stimulating job. And I have been really lucky that I've looked forward to getting out of bed every day of my adult life because of the career I've taken now. Is there parts of it that kind of suck? Yeah, there are.
Talk about that progress. I mean, you've been there where there's more women. Do you think if there were more women senators, that the gridlock that we all talk about so much, there would be less of it?
Okay, we finally got a budget passed in late last year, right? Then we finally got an appropriations bill passed without a continuing resolution, right? Then we finally got a farm bill passed. All right, let me tick through these. The budget chairman is now Patty Murray. The appropriations chairman is now Barbara McCaskill. And the agriculture chairman is now Debbie Stabenow. Do you see a pattern? We have strong women in leadership position now, and what those women want to do. And I'm sure what Kirsten will underline when she's out here in a few minutes, what we want to do is we want to find that common ground. We are not as interested in fighting as we are. I mean, it's a little bit like, you know, with my 3 children. You know, I mean, my job was to facilitate them figuring out a way to get along. And so it kind of comes naturally to me to try to figure out where we find that common ground. And I think women are good at that. I'm not saying men can't be, and I'm not saying all women are, but I do think that the women in leadership roles in our institution is making a difference in terms of the collaborative atmosphere.
You recently came out, I think, in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch in an interview saying you weren't besties with Hillary Clinton, but you are supporting her. Talk a little bit about that comment, and then also how important you think it is to maybe break that last glass ceiling.
Well, I'm really excited for Hillary Clinton's candidacy. I think she is going to be a terrific candidate, and I think she'll be a great president. And I'm very, very hopeful that she's going to run. All signs are good at this point. You know, politics, I have a bad habit in some ways, and that is I don't hide very well what I believe. I am pretty forthright, and I am a risk taker. And so when I told people that I was going to support Barack Obama in 2008, and all the political wise people around me said, "You're crazy, don't do it. There'll be huge fallout. It's a huge mistake," I did it. And I did it with everything I had. And that makes it difficult. You know, that was a tough primary between them 2 amazing candidates. They were, I mean, it wasn't like either one of them was a good old boy, with all due respect. These were 2 historic candidates, both had a lot to say for them. So that left, you know, it does. When you take one side over the other instead of hiding and not taking either, which some of my colleagues did, then there's a political price to pay. Having said that, it has been very much overblown. I mean, Secretary Clinton called me not long after I said I wanted to get out there and work for Ready for Hillary, and we had a great conversation. You know, I think she knows that when I go at this, I will go at it with everything I've got, and now I am 150% going after this with everything I've got to make sure that we can say, finally, Madam President.
All right, well, with that, we are getting the wrap here. Thank you so much, Senator. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, guys.